Hello! Here are a few use cases that you might be looking for, or that you would like to build with Razorpay webhook events. Connecting JavaScript with Razorpay, which will check if the payer's email ID is official or public mail. If it's public, then it will return the value in a string. Second, if payment has failed, then it will notify in Slack channel. Third, if payment failed and email ID is private, then send Slack alert to account manager, and then check if country is other than India, generate support ticket, and make entry in Google Sheet or Airtable or database. Fourth, if invoice is partial paid and event is successful, then send a Slack alert to account manager. Update client profile in HubSpot. Update payment details in accounting tool like Zoho Books. Fifth, if payment is successful and amount is more than 50,000 rupees, then post Slack alert in premium client channel. There are multiple use cases which you can build with Razorpay. You can build all these use cases on your own server and connect webhook and API, but it will take around 8 hours for you or your developer to build it. But with the help of viaSocket, we'll build in just the 15 few minutes. It's a no-code or low-code tool that allows you to write code, connect API and webhook, and deploy it without servers. viaSocket not only saves the time of development, it also reduces the agile process time for a development team because it's easy to make changes and deploy. Let's understand how you can save your time and resources. Let's start building. First, you need to log into your Razorpay account, and then go to the setting page. There you will see the option to connect a webhook. Click on the Add New Webhook link. A pop-up will appear that will ask for your webhook URL and the event details you wish to receive data from when an event occurs. Here's a list of events that you can select according to your need. Now let's create a webhook URL using viaSocket. For more understanding about the viaSocket, you can visit the website. For creating webhook, you should have an account on viaSocket.com. I am using my Gmail account to log in. When you will log into the account, it will ask you for the organization name, and then the project name, which can be shared with multiple people with different permissions. Once you enter the project, it will ask you to create a data source endpoint. Data source are the webhook URL generator, where it will ask for the data source name, and once you mention the name, it will show you your webhook URL. You can copy the URL or click on the data source for copying your webhook URL. After creating the data source, you need to connect that data with Workflow. To connect your workflow, you need to mention the workflow name and create it. We are going to receive all the data on Workflow through the data source. Workflow allows you to connect all your third-party API and write scripts, low-code if condition, and loop. Let's copy the webhook URL and mention that URL in the Razorpay. The secret can be anything that makes sure we are receiving data from Razorpay itself. Now we need to select events that we want to receive. I am selecting payment failed, payment capture, order paid, invoice, and also payment refund events. But you can select events according to your requirements. Once you have selected events, just click on Create Webhook button to save the selection. It will show you your webhook URL and the number of events you have subscribed to. Now, whenever any of these events occur, we will be receiving data on viaSocket. To check the data on our workflow, we need to select our workflow, which we have already created, and visit the Raw Data tab, which shows all the data we have received. My payment has failed and we've received the data on Workflow. But for testing, you can use JSON payload available in the Razorpay webhook document and send these JSON data on viaSocket webhook using Postman to get some dummy data to set up the flow. Now when you will refresh the page, data will appear in the JSON format in the Raw Data tab. And we can pick the data as a parameter, which we are going to use further in API and JavaScript. To pick the data, we need to click on the checkbox. You can rename the parameters while picking them. I picked event details. Payment status. Order IDs. Amount. Currency and ID. Similarly, you can pick more data like card details or bank details, or other parameters. This is a one-time setup. Once we pick all the necessary parameters and set up the flow, it will auto-pick the parameters and the flow will auto-work. I am also picking email and contact details to forward them in Slack and Google Sheet API. Let's check if we have picked all the necessary parameters. Let's pick time and date when the event occurred. If you use any other use case and receive data in a different format, you can pick complete data and parse the data using scripts to convert them into query parameters. Once we have picked all the parameters, we need to switch to the Variable tab. There we will see all the parameters we have picked. For connecting API, we first need to create a function from the Function tab. Functions work like asset storage, which keeps all your script in API so that you or your team member can use it in different flows. Create a new function and mention the name of the function. I am mentioning Slack messages. To connect the Slack, we are going to follow the easiest trick. First, we need to create a Slack channel where we will get our alerts, and then go to Apps section, and then the app directory to build the apps. There is an option to build. I am creating a new app from scratch to get Slack Message API. It will ask you to create the app by mentioning the app name, and then select your workspace name. Once app is created, there is an incoming webhook option. We need to click on it and then enable it by using the toggle button. Now here we can see the API details which we need to use. We need to generate a webhook. By clicking on Add New Webhook to Workspace button, it will ask us to select the channel name which we have already created to receive the alerts. Once you allowed it, it will show you the Slack webhook, which we need to copy and mention in the viaSocket Slack API configuration. To configure the Slack API in viaSocket, we're going to make the URL parameter dynamic, and to make the dynamic parameter, we just need to mention $ before the parameter name. You can choose any name as a parameter. We've made URL dynamic to use the Slack API in multiple flows with different Slack webhook URL. Now we need to mention the body parameters of the Slack API. We should try to keep the function dynamic as much as possible, so that we can use the same function again, without making any changes in the configuration. Here we will keep the message parameter dynamic, so that we can make changes in the message easily without making changes in the configuration. Then create the function and save the function without authentication. Now switch to the Workflow tab and click on Add a Step button, and then choose the Import Function option. Now click on the Use It button to use the function. Now the function is asking for URL and message, because we kept both these parameters dynamic. Go to the Slack app and copy the webhook URL and mention this URL inside the webhook URL field. Now we need to compose the Slack message by mapping the Razorpay data we are receiving. To use incoming data, we just need to mention $ and viaSocket will auto-suggest the names of the available parameters. If you need to send a dynamic message, for example, your payment has failed, and the total amount is 5,000 Rs. Then you need to replace failed with $ event details and 5,000 to the $ amount, so that every time flow is running, you will get alert dynamically. Once you have mapped all the data parameters, just click on Update Mapping button to save it. We also have Dry Run button to test the mapping. We can click on this button to run this mapping and check if we are receiving right data. Now we are going to build if condition, where we will mention if $ event details are equal to payment failed, then only it should be true. And then we will drag and drop the Slack plug we have created inside the if condition. Now whenever this condition is true, then only the Slack plug will send the data. Let's test it by clicking on the Dry Run button. Flow worked? Let's check if we have received the alert on Slack. Yes, we have received the alert on Slack. Also, all the parameters are correctly sending the map data. Now if we need to make changes in the message, We can again open the viaSocket Slack plug and make the changes in the message, and then we can again follow the same process to test and save the changes. We created payment failed condition. Now let's create one more if condition for payment success. Where we will mention if the $event detail is equal to payment successful, then send the success message alert in a different Slack channel. And for doing that, we will be following the same process. This time we just need to use the Slack function, which we have already created in the function storage. For composing the message field, we will use the same method to call the Razorpay incoming parameters. And mention the new Slack channel webhook URL and then save the plug. To test the newly created plug, we can dry run and test it. Now let's drag and drop the plug inside the if condition. Now let's create a JavaScript to modify the data we are receiving. Script pop-up will show you help document to create a script. Let's mention the name of the script and start writing the script. Name can be anything. I've already prepared the script which I am pasting here. This script will get the email from Razorpay data and check if the email ID is an official mail IDs or public domain. Let's test the script by mentioning different domain names. If email ID have private domain, it will return the domain name. We will pick this response parameter and rename it. Similarly, we can pick any response and use those responses in different flows. And if the email ID has the public domain, it will return the string that is email provider. Let's save the script and use the response parameter. Let's make the change in the existing condition. To make the changes, we will use the domain parameter, which we have generated using JavaScript. We have written in a condition, whenever a payment is failed and the domain is not a public domain, then only trigger the Slack API to post the message. We can drag and drop the plugs. Here I am dropping one if condition into another if condition. This is how you can make endless if-else conditions. Now let's connect the Google Sheet API, which will create a new row every time we will receive the data from the Razorpay. To connect Google Sheets, I am searching Sheet API from viaSocket Marketplace. You can search all the available services from the Marketplace, and if it's not available, you can build your own service with the help of function building. Here in the Google Sheet API, we need to map all the parameters we want to send to Google Sheets. I am creating a new sheet to connect the Google Sheet API. For connecting it, I need to map two different IDs from the spreadsheet URL. First is my spreadsheet ID, which I will copy and map in the plug. And second, I need to copy the GID and mention it in the plug. Now we need to map all the parameters which we want to submit to Google Sheets. To map the parameters, we need to follow the same process. We need to mention the $ to pick the parameter dynamically or we can also keep the value static. We can also map the parameters which we are receiving as the response of any API or script. Once we update the plug, it will show the authentication option. To authenticate, we need to select Google Authentication and then select the Google Sheet API option. It will redirect us and ask for permissions. We can also increase or decrease the number of input fields by making changes in the Google Sheet API from the Functions tab. We can dry run and test the Google Sheet plug. Now I'm going to test my complete workflow using the Workflow Dry Run button. Once you run the complete flow, it will run all the API and connectors we have connected. Let's check if our workflow ran successfully and if we have received a new entry in the Google Sheet. The workflow worked successfully and captured the data. Similarly, you can connect your own API to make internal code easy, or connect any third-party services like Airtable, Zendesk, Zoho Books, LeadSquared, HubSpot, Notion, or any other service which provides API. We can customize the flow according to our needs, and we can use conditions, scripts, webhook, and APIs. viaSocket also have low-code built-in loop function. The Razorpay flow is completed, and it will automatically work whenever any event occurs in the Razorpay. Hopefully, you liked the video and you would try no-code viaSocket platform that can boost your development work and save time for your developers. Thank you.